Sure thing. Good morning, everybody. So I'm Glenn Sturm with Virginia Cooperative Extension. I'll just mention for those who don't know Extension, just the 10-second elevator speech. We're the educational outreach component of the land-grant university system here in Virginia. So part of Virginia Tech in Blacksburg and Virginia State in Petersburg. And that's education in youth education through 4-H, agricultural natural resources, and in my area, that's family and consumer sciences. Today, what I'm talking a little bit about is our drinking water clinic or our well water clinic. So the technical name for it for the state is the Virginia Household Water Quality Program, but because that's hard to remember, we just call it the Well Water or Drinking Water Clinic. Somebody from the state was trying to get VAHAQUIPS to be a thing, and I'm like, people are not going to remember VAHAQUIPS, so I'm going to keep calling it a well water clinic. But it's been around since 1989. It's an initiative where Dr. Aaron Ling, who is in Blacksburg, who's the one who runs the biosystems engineering, is the one who runs this program through the Biosystems Engineering Lab at Virginia Tech, is the one who trains us here in the county level to provide this program. And it's multiple stages to it. So basically what happens is once you register, there is a kickoff meeting where you get your sample kit, you get instructions of how to take the samples to test for your well water. And then the homeowners actually go back, they take their samples. There's actually a very short timeline specifically because some of those things really need to be tested within 24 hours. So it becomes you test in the morning, you drop it off to me later in the morning. I meet somebody from Blacksburg halfway in Charlottesville, and then they take it there. And those components that need to be tested really quickly are tested right away. Some of the other components do take several weeks though to get tested. And then the interpretation meeting where you get the test results back. I will stop to mention here, one of the concerns we hear sometimes is whether or not it's confidential, or are we going to report it to the health department? Is the health department going to do anything about it if they get that information? So it's completely confidential. Even I only get the aggregate results unless a homeowner is willing to share it with me. And I can tell you from talking to the health department, even if I gave it to them, they're not going to come to your house and shut off your water. So so none of those are a thing if people are concerned about that. They're completely confidential. We don't report. The only information that's ever shared with other organizations is the aggregate data of saying these 70 results resulted in these things popping up. So since this program's been going for the last 35, 36 years, we've tested 44,000 different wells and springs throughout all of Virginia. So they've had at least a couple results in every county, maybe not every independent city in Virginia. So it's been pretty widespread state program. Next slide. So water, and again, I'll be real brief with this, but just give you kind of an idea of why we test and what are different areas that can affect that water quality. So starting from the top left, some is just natural things from the hydrogeology. So generally what you're getting from the groundwater is maybe more of aesthetic staining from like iron and manganese, but there are things that in rare cases, elevated levels can cause genuine health concerns that just come from the ground. So elevated level of fluoride comes naturally from the ground. Elevated level of arsenic, not usually out here, thankfully, but in rare cases that can happen naturally from the groundwater as well. So there are things that even without surface contaminants or things that are added to the water could potentially be concerns coming just from the groundwater. Treatment and plumbing. So I'm sure everyone heard through the news when Flint, Michigan was having its concerns with lead. So again, that's something where the water was not treated to be to deal with its corrosivity. So it corroded pipes, and a lot of the old pipes and infrastructure had lead in them, and that ended up in the drinking water. So that's something that kind of comes from the plumbing. And if that plumbing is corroded, that can obviously have very serious health concerns. The other one is water softeners. Really pop quiz. How do water softeners work? At most basic level. Does anybody know? Salt. That's exactly it. So you remove mineral ions to take the hardness out, but you have to exchange it with something, and that's a chemistry equation beyond my head because I'm not a chemistry major. But you swap those mineral ions for sodium ions to get the minerals out, but then you're adding sodium into your drinking water, which generally is not at a level that's a really concern, but if you have hypertensive adults and it's really hard water, because it's one-for-one exchange, right? If it's really hard water, you have to add a lot of sodium back in to exchange it. There can be a noticeable amount of sodium added back to your drinking water. We'll talk about that as well. Obviously, always concerned with what's happening, above ground, and is it getting your drinking water, whether it's chemicals, in rare cases, agricultural runoff. You see a little example there of the dog doing their business. If that's too close to the wellhead. I mentioned earlier, is you set up a chicken coop near your well. That's probably not a great idea either. And what kind of goes hand in hand with that too is how does your physical well look? So are there cracks and issues with that? Do you have the more modern well caps, which I won't go super in depth with, but if you attend the meeting, I will. Is it being maintained? Is there proper grouting? Those sorts of things that are meant to prevent a lot of those contaminants getting directly into your well. And unfortunately, I will mention that does if everything's upkept really well, that does great for your well. But there aren't that many water tables, so that means there are other people that are also drinking from that same source of water. And if they're not upkeeping it well, that can potentially get into your drinking water as well. It is a shared resource, well water. Next slide. Just really briefly to mention, when you're in a public water system, those are, and I'll say those are, I don't want to get too political. There are guidelines to have that tested, and what are supposed to be regular testing intervals. So that exists if you're on public water, but if you're on private well water, it's usually inspected the first time. There are applications, but after that, it's completely up to the homeowner, right? There's no agency that's regularly checking the quality of that water, for your household at least. And even when you buy a new home, because a lot of people say, oh, well, I bought this home that's on well water. It's been tested, so it's safe. I will say from my personal experience, probably at least 90% of the time, the only thing they're testing for is bacteria, which is important. I'm not going to act like that's not important. It's very important, but that's not the only thing to be potentially concerned about. So those are things that it is up the responsibility of the homeowner to periodically test. Next slide. So reasons to test, we talked about health and safety. And one of the biggest things is some of the most dangerous contaminants are ones that do not have aesthetic qualities, or at levels that can be dangerous don't yet present aesthetic qualities. And what I mean is you can't taste it, smell it, you can't really see it in the water. Again, when we also those photos from Flint, it was really cloudy and it's really obvious that was contaminated water. But you can have high levels of lead, dangerous levels of lead, and you can't see, smell it, or taste it. You can have dangerous levels of arsenic, you can't see or smell or taste it. Dangerous levels of E. coli, can't see, smell, or taste it, right? You're only going to know if one of two things: you either test it or you get sick enough that the hospital figures it out. I know it sounds like a scare tactic, but that is the concern with some of those more dangerous ones. And then obviously preventative measures tend to be more less expensive than again a hospital bill in worst case scenario. But even thinking of something like corrosive water, I mean, if you find that out before it corrodes through your pipes, that filter should hopefully be cheaper than having to replace all of your indoor plumbing. And then hopefully, in worst case scenarios, some legal protection if there's been some changes nearby that impacted the quality of your water. What is recommended for testing? Generally 1 to 3 years. What I've seen it more separated out is test for bacteria annually if you're on well water, and then do a more comprehensive test like this every 3 years. I will mention we're not trying to kind of crowd out the private certified labs that do this as well, but there are other sources. Right near Cannon is Coastal Bioanalysts, and they're a certified lab that does testing for bacteria. So if it doesn't work for people to attend with us, we always recommend going to them so you can get a certified lab to do bacteria testing. If you have people that are immunocompromised or concerns, whether it's pregnant women or infants in the home, if you have a lot of stomach issues that are starting to come up, and again, that's not something you've really thought about, could it be from the water? That could be a good time to test as well. Changes in taste or appearance and any major services that have been done, it's probably a good time to go ahead and test. Next slide. I'm not going to go super in depth to any of these. This just kind of gives you an idea of just a listing of what we test for. I will mention I'll hand out these for who are here in person, so you have this list if you're curious for it when we're done with the presentation. For those in Zoom land, just let me know. I'm happy to email this presentation. But test for bacteria in 2 forms: total coliform and E. coli. Total coliform is basically you have bacteria in there. It may not be harmful. E. coli is you have fecal bacteria in there, and you should really do something about it. Then different chemicals. Some of these come from surface contaminants sometimes, particularly things like nitrate. Some of them come naturally from the ground: fluoride, arsenic, iron, manganese, and some may be coming from your plumbing or your filtration system. So like lead and copper would be examples of that. And then pH total dissolved solid would come naturally from groundwater probably too. But that just kind of gives you the listing of what we test for. For those curious, just so you kind of know, this is last year's well water clinic where we had 70 kits. What's circled are the ones that showed up on at least 10% of the tests. So iron's really common out here, comes naturally from the groundwater. It's an aesthetic thing, so it causes some discoloration. If it's really high, it may cause some staining as well, but it's not generally a health concern. Hardness, I think people generally know what hard water is. So there's a lot of mineral ions in the water. It's not uncommon. One of those minerals is fluoride. It's pretty common here. Fortunately, we generally see it at where it says it's an excessive level. We generally see it at the level where it may cause some standing issues with teeth, but not at the really high level where it may cause bone disease, which is what we're really concerned about. That's why you see that standard, and you see two numbers for fluoride. One is for this dental fluorosis, which is the teeth staining. 4.0 or above is for like serious dental or skeletal disease. Total dissolved solids, so it is what it sounds like. What total amount of dissolved solids do you have in your drinking water? That and sodium tend to be pretty high, in particular because we're very close to the ocean. And if anybody's looked at, I say if anybody, it's not probably a common thing for you to just look online at what the water tables look like. But the ocean kind of comes and curves into the different water tables here on the coast. So the deeper you get, the more brackish or salt water you get in there. So it's really common to have some sodium and dissolved solids in there, which in and of itself is not generally a concern, but just a reason for it there. The other reason you see it at 75% excessive for sodium, because there is not a universal standard for well water quality, we use the public water systems metrics as kind of a stand-in for that. And public water is not supposed to have sodium in it. So their standard is only 20 milligrams per liter, which is a very, very small amount. So your recommended daily intake is, 2,300 milligrams, 1,500 if you're hypertensive. So that's a generally trace amount. But it is something to consider that you see whoever, and again, it's confidential, so I don't know who the person was, but whoever had that almost 300 milligrams per liter, you think they drink a couple liters of well water, that's 600 milligrams. If they're hypertensive, that's like half of your daily recommended just from drinking water that a lot of people don't even calculate as part of that. So it is something to consider for sure. And again, not to scare people, see bacteria and they see 45% and they kind of freak out. Total coliform, most of total coliform bacteria are not harmful to you, but it's just a reminder that your well water system's not sterile generally, unless you are treating it to be that way. So there's a good chance you have bacteria in there. The one we're really more concerned about is the one below it, which is that E. coli, which is a harmful fecal bacteria. And fortunately, what we've seen better over the last few years is fewer and fewer corrosive metals in our drinking water. So copper and lead, very few exceeding it over the last couple of years, which is good, because those numbers were higher when I started doing these clinics about a decade ago. But yeah, and that's kind of a real quick summary of what we test for. Next slide. And this is just, and again, I'm happy to share these slides, so don't, if you're trying to write down every single one, please don't, because that's a lot. But to try and make it more accessible when I do these well water clinics, I do it at multiple locations, multiple times. So generally we have 4 different kickoff meetings between Matthews, Middlesex, and here in Gloucester, and try and do a couple evening, a lunchtime, and a morning one. 3 different drop-off locations, generally all the 3 extension offices. And then when you pick up the results, same 4 different locations at 4 different times as well. I realize there is an error on this one, so I'll have to make a note to that. The Middlesex Extension Office moved about a month ago, so that's actually a different area now. So kits are $70 to get tested. We do have some scholarships available, particularly for limited resource households. The specifics on what we mean by limited resource households is we try and align with CERCAP, which I'm not going to remember what their acronym is, but it's like Southeastern. They deal with grants and water quality regionally, but I never remember what their acronym is for that. So we align with their grant program, which is 200% of the federal poverty line. So that's the level that below that you qualify for a scholarship. And I think on the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about what the scholarships are. Registration is open. It is going quick though. As a kind of side note is generally we have a lot more available kits that we can sell for this. But the lab had a major vacancy within their lab for a while. So instead of their typical lab testing year going from like February to November, it didn't start till June. So everybody was kind of squished in and everybody got fewer kits. So I only have 60 this year. And as of last night, in the first 6 days since it's been open, we're down to 12.
Holy moly.
So it's going quick. So if there are people interested in it, we as of last night still have 12 left. But in future years, we should have more like 90 to 120 we're able to do for kits, assuming a full year for testing. But I do maintain a well water email list. So if people are interested in future years and they couldn't test this year, just let me know, send that email. I do not use that to send a bunch of like extension ads and things like that. So if you're on that email list, you're just gonna get well water clinic related stuff. Next slide. So what I would love for some help for community organizations, particularly those of you who are working with predominantly limited resource households, is we do have scholarship funds. And despite me trying to promote this over the last couple of years in the scholarship, we haven't gotten a lot of scholarship applications. So I have a little bit of, not a lot, but a little bit of money built up for this. So if you know households that you think could really benefit for this, that you know would income qualify, like I said, unfortunately this year we're kind of running out of slots, but probably next summer we'll do it again. Because I do it annually, and usually do it in the summer when we have a normal schedule. And you see there, following the SIRCAP grant guidelines, 200% of the federal poverty line. Fully covers that $70 for the testing. The reason we align with that SIRCAP grant guideline is for smaller expenses, if I have the funds for it, so covering like the cost of shot chlorination, if they have a positive test for E. coli, that will handle internally. If it's something that requires a really significant change to their well, we just we point them to SIRCAP and they can put in a grant for that. And then they know if they qualify for our scholarship, income-wise, they'll qualify for that SIRCAP grant as well. And next slide. And that's kind of your quick rundown of what the test is and what we test for. And let me know if anybody has any questions. On there is also the link for the statewide website. So you get which is actually great. So you not only get a list of all the well water clinics that are going there, but again, we're an educational institution, so we're not trying to like keep it proprietary what we teach in the well water clinic. So you will see a peer-reviewed publication on every single contaminant we talk about that's available on that website as well. So if you're just interested in and it'll talk about what the contaminant is, what it looks like when it shows up, if there's health concerns, and how you treat for it for every single one.
Nice.
Yes?
Radon. Do you see that in I don't see it listed as far as being tested for water. Does radon even exist in the water?
I don't have the answer to that question because we don't test for it. Some of those, I don't want to call it fringe because we don't necessarily know how much it's showing up in there, but some of the other contaminants that have been questioned about that, so people have asked about like microplastics and things like that as well. Unfortunately, we don't test for that for a couple reasons. Those tend to be more specialized, and the lab either doesn't have equipment or it'd be incredibly expensive for them to test for that. So admittedly, the goal of this well water clinic is what are things that we know are commonly showing up that is affordable for a university lab to test. So that kind of midpoint of that. So I don't even have the answer for radon.
I noticed on the one slide showing what the recommendations are from the state of Virginia, you skipped over the EPA. Is there a reason for that? Is the EPA still active in this testing and things like that?
They're still the organization that is handling testing of public water systems. Yes. I have to be careful with my words. They're not as large as they once were, and there are concerns that they've not been testing as regularly as they have. I know I'm being recorded. I'm getting myself in trouble. But they are still the organization that handles it for testing public water.
Okay, very well put, man. Very well put.
Yes.
So when you say 12 people have already taken spots,
it's actually, unfortunately, the other way. 48 have taken the 60 slots. We have 12 available right now.
wow, so they've already signed up for the initial meeting, or?
For the signed up for the kits. So it's fewer than we only opened it up I think 6 days ago. So I was not coming to this meeting expecting to only tell you guys we have 12 slots left. So there's not many, but again, the reason we only have 60 is because we've been have a really condensed schedule statewide. We'll have a lot more next year, and I normally do my clinics in the summer. So it also, if this is not an immediate, I will say if they have an immediate health concern that they want to test for, or they're resealing their home, things like that, they should do it through a certified lab. If it's not that sort of thing and they just haven't really tested in a while, if they don't get into the last 12, just have them email me, put it on an email list, and we'll get them signed up.
So they're signing up before the initial meeting. So were the spots divided among the 3 counties? Or?
So it's just a block of 60 across all 3 counties. It's just one registration site. So yeah, there's 60 available slots. You pay for registration online and reserve one of your slots.
Does that include your scholarships?
That does include the scholarship. So we have had, and I will say this is the year we've had more than just a couple for the first time in a while, which is good. But we've got 3 or 4 people on scholarships that are included within the 48 that have signed up.
I'm with our social services board in Matthews, and I was thinking about offering to a few of our families.
That would be-
need it, but it sounds like it's pretty much gone.
It's closing quickly, but yeah. So either if that's something that can be done relatively quickly for the last 12 slots, or again, we'll do it again next summer. So that can be signed up. Do that next year.